Sign them, Evelyn. I should have done this years ago. I'm in love with someone else, and I'm done pretending. Richard Carter slammed the divorce papers onto the dining table and pushed them toward Evelyn. I'm done pretending, he snapped. Sign them, Evelyn. I can't live like this anymore. The sound startled Evelyn so much that the cup in her hand slipped and shattered on the floor. She stared at the broken pieces, then slowly lifted her eyes to her husband of 29 years. What are you talking about? She whispered. Richard folded his arms impatiently. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I met someone else. The words hung heavily in the air. Evelyn blinked. Someone else? She let out a nervous laugh. Richard, stop joking. I'm not joking. His voice was cold. Her name is Vanessa Reed. She's younger, she's exciting, and she actually appreciates me. Evelyn felt her chest tighten. 29 years, Richard. So, she repeated. Her eyes filled with tears. I stood beside you when your business failed. I sold my jewelry to help pay the mortgage. I gave up my art classes because you said we couldn't afford them. I raised our son almost alone while you worked late. Richard shrugged. And I provided for this family. She stared at him in disbelief. Is that all those years mean to you? Richard sighed dramatically. I don't want to fight. I just want freedom. At that moment, the front door opened. A woman walked inside. Tall, blonde, confident. Vanessa. Evelyn froze. Richard didn't even look embarrassed. Good, you're here, he said. Vanessa smiled smugly. I hope we're not interrupting. Evelyn slowly stood. You brought her here? Richard shrugged. We're adults. Vanessa looked around the house. Cute place. Evelyn felt something inside her crack. Not because Richard loved another woman. Not because her marriage was ending. But because the man she'd spent almost 3 decades loving no longer respected her. Vanessa smirked. Richard says you're taking the house well. Evelyn looked directly at her. I didn't know thieves announced themselves these days. Vanessa's smile vanished. Excuse me. Richard stepped forward. Enough, Evelyn. No. Evelyn replied quietly. Enough is what I've had. She picked up the pen. Richard smiled. That's better. But there were no tears. No screaming. No begging. She signed. Richard seemed relieved. See? That wasn't difficult. Evelyn handed him the papers. Congratulations. Vanessa wrapped her arm around him. Come on, honey. We have dinner reservations. Richard picked up his suitcase. As he reached the door, he paused. You'll be okay. Evelyn looked at him calmly. Will I? Richard nodded. You've always managed. Then he walked away. Vanessa followed. Neither of them looked back. The silence inside the house felt unbearable. Evelyn sat on the couch and stared at the wedding photograph above the fireplace. 29 years. Gone. Her phone suddenly rang. Unknown number. She ignored it. The phone rang again. And again. Finally, she answered. Hello. A deep voice spoke. Mrs. Carter? Who is this? My name is Graham Mercer. I don't know any Graham Mercer. You knew Theodore Blake. Evelyn froze. My father. Yes. Her eyes widened. My father died 15 years ago. I know. Then why are you calling me? Because your father instructed me to contact you when the time was right. Evelyn frowned. What? May I come tomorrow morning? No. I think you've made a mistake. There is no mistake. The man's voice remained calm. Your father trusted me with something that belongs to you. Evelyn's heart raced. What are you talking about? The wooden chest. She sat upright. Nobody knew about the chest. Not even Richard. It had remained untouched in the attic for years. How do you know about that? There was silence. Then Graham answered. Because your father told me. After hanging up, Evelyn sat motionless. Memories flooded back. Her father, Theodore Blake. A simple furniture craftsman. Quiet. Kind. Always working with his hands. He had loved her deeply. Before his death, he'd once said something strange. Not everyone who looks ordinary lives an ordinary life. At the time, she'd laughed. Now, those words echoed in her mind. Unable to sleep, she climbed into the attic. Dust covered everything. Then she saw it. The chest. Exactly where she'd left it 15 years earlier. Her hands trembled. What did you leave behind, Dad? Little did Evelyn know, the answer hidden inside that chest would change everything she thought she knew about her father. And about herself. But before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments. Should Evelyn have thrown Richard and Vanessa out the moment they walked in together? And if you love emotional stories with shocking twists and satisfying endings, Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Because by the following morning, Evelyn would discover that the man she thought had lived an ordinary life had been keeping a secret worth billions. Evelyn barely slept. Long after midnight, she remained seated beside the old wooden chest, her fingers tracing the worn edges. Why now? She whispered into the darkness. Why after all these years? By morning, dark circles sat beneath her eyes. At exactly 9 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Evelyn hesitated before opening the door. Standing outside was a distinguished man in his late 60s. Gray hair, tailored suit, calm eyes. Graham Mercer? She asked. He smiled politely. Mrs. Carter. Evelyn studied him carefully. You really knew my father? For 42 years. She stepped aside. Come in. Graham entered and looked around. The house hasn't changed much. You've been here before? Many times. Evelyn frowned. No, you haven't. Graham smiled softly. You were just too young to remember. He noticed the wooden chest sitting on the coffee table. Good. You found it. Evelyn crossed her arms. Before anything else, I want answers. And you'll have them. He sat down. But first, your father left instructions. From his pocket, he produced an old key. The second compartment. Evelyn's eyebrows rose. Second compartment? Graham nodded. Your father enjoyed secrets. Her heart pounded. After several moments of searching, she found a hidden section beneath the chest. Inside lay a sealed envelope. Tears immediately filled her eyes. The handwriting. It was her father's. With trembling fingers, she opened it. My dearest Evelyn, if you're reading this, then life has tested you in ways I hoped it never would. Trust Graham Mercer. He is family in every way that matters. Do not fear what you are about to learn. Everything I built was always meant for you. Love always. Dad. Tears rolled down Evelyn's cheeks. She pressed the letter against her chest. I miss you so much, she whispered. Graham quietly handed her a tissue. He missed you too. For several minutes, neither spoke. Finally, Evelyn wiped her eyes. Everything he built. Graham nodded. Yes. He built furniture. No. Evelyn frowned. What do you mean, no? Theodore Blake sold furniture. He owned a small workshop. Graham smiled. He owned much more than that. Evelyn stared. My father wasn't rich. Rich? Graham chuckled. No, Mrs. Carter. He leaned forward. Your father was extraordinarily wealthy. She blinked. I'm sorry. He spent decades acquiring land, investing in companies, and creating holding corporations. Evelyn laughed nervously. No. It's true. No. Very true. No, you're mistaken. He anticipated that response. Graham opened his briefcase. Stacks of documents appeared. Company reports. Titles. Investment statements. Photographs. Contracts. Evelyn's breathing quickened. What is all this? Your inheritance. She stared blankly. My inheritance. Approximately $4 billion. The room spun. She burst out laughing. Then stopped. Then laughed again. This isn't funny. I'm not joking. My father fixed chairs. He preferred people to underestimate him. Evelyn stood up. No. She shook her head. No, no, no. She paced around the room. My father drove the same truck for 20 years. He liked that truck. He wore old shirts. He liked old shirts. He never traveled. He traveled constantly. What? Business meetings. Evelyn's mouth fell open. He told me he was attending furniture exhibitions. Graham smiled. That wasn't entirely false. She sat down heavily. This is impossible. It isn't. But why? Because he wanted peace. For $1 billion? 3.87, to be exact. Evelyn covered her mouth. Oh my God. And every cent belongs to you. Silence filled the room. Finally, she whispered. Richard. Graham raised an eyebrow. Your husband. My ex-husband. I'm sorry. She laughed bitterly. He left me yesterday. Graham looked genuinely saddened. The timing breaks my heart. Then his eyes narrowed. Did he know? No. Good. Evelyn looked up. Good. Graham nodded. Very good. Why? Because your father specifically warned me. He warned you about Richard? He warned me about anyone who might value your wealth more than your heart. Evelyn sat speechless. My father knew. He worried. He never said anything. Love made him hope he was wrong. Tears returned to her eyes. He was protecting me. Yes. The two sat quietly. Then Graham smiled. Would you like to see one of your properties? My properties? He nodded. Evelyn laughed. This sounds insane. It becomes less insane after the first week. 2 hours later, they arrived at a massive office tower. Evelyn stopped walking. No. Graham smiled. Yes. This building. Yours. She looked upward. 28 floors. People bustling everywhere. Luxury cars outside. No. Yes. No. Mrs. Carter, you're going to say no quite often for the next few months. Inside, executives immediately stood up. Good afternoon, Mr. Mercer. Good afternoon. Then everyone turned to Evelyn. Ma'am. She nearly hid behind Graham. This feels ridiculous. It will pass. One woman approached. Welcome, Mrs. Carter. Evelyn blinked. You know me? The woman smiled warmly. We've been waiting for you. Waiting. For 15 years. Evelyn nearly stumbled. What? The founder made us promise. Founder? Theodore Blake. Tears immediately filled her eyes again. Her father. Even after death. Still taking care of her. Still protecting her. Back across town, Richard laughed while drinking wine with Vanessa. I expected more drama, Vanessa said. Richard smirked. She's predictable. She didn't beg? No. No tears. Surprisingly. Vanessa shrugged. Maybe she gave up years ago. Richard chuckled. She'll realize what she lost eventually. His phone rang. It was his son, Ethan. Dad, what happened? I got divorced. You got divorced yesterday, and you're telling me now? It was for the best. For who? Everyone. Ethan sighed angrily. Mom gave you 30 years. And I gave her 30 years. No, Dad. His son's voice hardened. Mom gave. You took. The line went dead. Richard frowned. Ungrateful boy. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Forget about them. He smiled. Exactly. Meanwhile, Evelyn sat inside her father's office. His portrait hung on the wall. She slowly approached it. You really did all this? Her voice cracked. Who were you, Dad? Graham stood behind her. He was a genius. He never wanted recognition. He only wanted one thing. What? Your happiness. Evelyn smiled through tears. He failed. No. Graham smiled gently. He was simply early. As they left, Graham suddenly turned serious. Mrs. Carter. Yes. From this moment forward, trust very carefully. Why? Because once people learn who you are, some will love you. He paused. And others will pretend to. That evening, Evelyn stood in front of the mirror. For the first time in years, she didn't see Richard's wife. She saw herself. And she made a promise. No more shrinking. No more apologizing. No more living for everyone else. Little did she know, the next person to enter her life would change everything. And months later, the man who abandoned her would walk into a room, only to discover that the woman he thought had nothing had become the most powerful person he had ever known. But his greatest shock was still waiting. And trust me, what happened next left everyone speechless. If you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments. Do you think Richard deserves a second chance after what he did to Evelyn? And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do, because the final part contains the most satisfying moment in the entire story. 3 months later, Richard Carter was miserable. Vanessa Reed had stopped smiling. The expensive dinners had become arguments. The excitement that had once thrilled them had disappeared. And worst of all, Richard's construction business was struggling. One evening, Vanessa threw a magazine onto the table. I'm tired of hearing excuses, Richard. Richard frowned. What now? We haven't gone anywhere in weeks. My business is going through a rough period. She folded her arms. That's your answer for everything. Richard sighed. You knew I wasn't a billionaire. Vanessa laughed. Apparently, I had better options. Richard stared. What does that mean? It means I'm tired. Vanessa. I'm going out. With who? She smiled coldly. Someone who doesn't spend all day complaining. The door slammed behind her. Richard sat alone. For the first time in his life, silence frightened him. His mind drifted to Evelyn. Her kindness. Her patience. The meals she prepared. The encouragement she gave him when he nearly lost everything years ago. He remembered the nights she stayed awake helping him with paperwork. And he remembered how little he had appreciated any of it. Across town, Evelyn's life had transformed. She had moved into a beautiful home in Silver Heights. But what brought her joy wasn't the house. It was the small art studio she'd built for herself. Paintings covered the walls. For the first time in nearly 30 years, she was creating again. One afternoon, Graham Mercer walked in smiling. There she is. Evelyn laughed. There who is? The woman your father always knew you could become. She smiled. I'm still learning. And you're doing wonderfully. Graham handed her an envelope. What is this? An invitation. She opened it. Brighton Falls Charity Gala. Her eyes widened. Oh no. Oh yes. Graham. No. She laughed nervously. Please no. He chuckled. It's time. Time for what? To stop hiding. Evelyn shook her head. I don't belong in rooms like that. Graham smiled. You own half the room. She burst out laughing. I'm serious. So am I. Then his expression softened. Your father spent 15 years preparing everyone for your arrival. My arrival? He believed one day you'd be ready. Evelyn lowered her eyes. And if I'm not, then borrow some courage from him. Meanwhile, Richard received a phone call. His friend Martin was excited. You have to come tonight. Come where? The Brighton Falls Charity Gala. Richard frowned. Why? Networking. I don't feel like it. Martin laughed. There are billionaires attending. Richard's ears perked up. Billionaires. Exactly. Vanessa overheard. Billionaires. Martin's voice echoed through the speaker. The new owner of Blackridge Enterprises will be announced tonight. Vanessa's eyes widened. I've heard they're incredibly wealthy. Richard smiled. Looks like we're going. Hours later, luxury cars lined the entrance. Richard adjusted his suit. Vanessa fixed her dress. Remember, she whispered, we mingle. Martin waved. Richard, they entered the ballroom. Vanessa gasped. This place is incredible. Then suddenly, the crowd began applauding. Everyone turned. Richard casually glanced toward the staircase. His smile disappeared. His glass slipped from his hand. Crash. Vanessa froze. No. Richard's face turned pale. Standing elegantly at the top of the staircase was Evelyn. His Evelyn. But she looked different. Confident. Radiant. Happy. Graham, Richard whispered. He recognized the older man beside her. People surrounded them immediately. Mrs. Carter. Congratulations. What an honor. Richard blinked repeatedly. What is happening? Martin looked shocked. You know her? Richard swallowed hard. She's my wife. Ex-wife, Vanessa corrected. Martin nearly choked. Wait. He looked from Evelyn to Richard. Your ex-wife is Evelyn Carter? Richard nodded weakly. Martin stared at him in disbelief. Richard. What? You divorced her? Richard couldn't answer. At that moment, the host stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to introduce the chairwoman and principal owner of Blackridge Enterprises. Applause erupted. Evelyn Carter. The room exploded with cheers. Richard's knees nearly buckled. Vanessa's mouth fell open. No. Martin grabbed Richard. Do you realize who she is? Richard whispered. No. Martin stared. She's one of the wealthiest women in the country. Richard's world stopped. No. Yes. Vanessa's breathing quickened. Oh my God. Richard looked up at Evelyn. And for the first time in months, he saw her. Not as the woman who cooked his meals. Not as the woman who washed his clothes. Not as the woman who stood quietly in the background. He saw her. And suddenly, losing her became the biggest mistake of his life. Later that evening, he approached her. Evelyn. She turned calmly. Richard. Vanessa wisely stayed behind. Richard's eyes were filled with regret. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I'm sorry. She nodded. I know. No, Evelyn. His voice trembled. I was blind. Tears filled his eyes. I threw away 30 years. She remained quiet. I miss you. Still, she said nothing. I miss us. Then she smiled sadly. There was no us, Richard. His face fell. What? There was me. And there was you. But there stopped being an us a very long time ago. Evelyn. She gently raised her hand. No. You don't understand. No, Richard. Her voice remained calm. You don't understand. Tears filled her eyes. I spent years trying to become enough for you. Richard lowered his head. And one day I realized something. What? I already was. He closed his eyes. Evelyn, please. No. She smiled softly. I forgive you. Hope appeared in his eyes. You do? Yes. But forgiveness isn't an invitation. His smile disappeared. You don't want me back? She shook her head. You didn't lose me the day you left. Her voice cracked slightly. You lost me during all the years you stopped seeing me. Richard broke down. And for the first time in his life, he cried. Not because he'd lost billions. Not because he'd lost status. But because he'd lost the woman who had loved him without conditions. And that pain was far greater. Later that night, Evelyn stood outside beneath the stars. Beautiful evening. She smiled. Daniel Foster stood beside her, the kind architect she'd grown close to over the past few months. He handed her a cup of coffee. For the lady who conquered the world. She laughed. I didn't conquer anything. No. He smiled. I think you conquered yourself. She looked up at the stars. My father would have loved this view. He'd be proud of you. Tears appeared in her eyes. I hope so. Daniel smiled. I know so. Over the following year, Evelyn established scholarships. She built shelters. She funded schools. And every project carried one name. The Theodore Blake Foundation. As for Richard, Vanessa eventually left him. His business declined. And although he rebuilt his life, one regret remained. He had mistaken loyalty for ordinary. He had mistaken kindness for weakness. And he had mistaken a treasure for something common. One afternoon, years later, he saw Evelyn being interviewed. She smiled She smiled brightly. She looked peaceful. And Richard smiled too. Not because she belonged to him, but because she had finally become the woman she was always meant to be. And perhaps that was enough. Because in the end, the greatest inheritance Theodore Blake left his daughter wasn't billions of dollars. It was the courage to remember her worth. And once she remembered, no one could ever make her forget it again. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more emotional stories filled with betrayal, shocking twists, and satisfying endings. And tell us in the comments. If you were Evelyn, would you have given Richard a second chance? Until next time, remember this. Sometimes the people who underestimate you are simply preparing themselves to witness your rise.